Good afternoon. My name is Colleen Albert, and I am a product evangelist with Highland Software. And in the Highland Software world, I'm kind of a marketing person in the development department. And so a lot of times when I say what my title is and what I do, I'll inevitably get the question, a product evangelist? What's that? Is that like church? Well, kind of. I mean, it is my responsibility to spread the good word of the software, to translate the technology that our amazing developers in-house create, that is the OnBase product, and translate that into how it can solve business problems and drive efficiency. And so what I'll be focusing on today is the OnBase Unity client, one of the many products that I personally am responsible for, both as a product expert and as an evangelist. I would love to make this session interactive, but I will continue to just keep going. So if you have a question, you're going to have to raise your hand or yell out or stop me, and I would love to take them throughout. In the meantime, I've got a lot of slides, and I would love to do a little bit of demo. So I'm just going to keep going unless you speak up. So please do so. All right, so how many here, just one question, I never realized to poll the audience at the beginning, but just one question. How many of you here are existing OnBase customers and you have familiarity with the OnBase product already? Okay, excellent. That's everybody. That's good. So I'm speaking to a room of people that know the OnBase lingo a little bit already. And probably many of you have heard of the buzz around the new OnBase Unity client, but you haven't yet experienced it. And if you have, I'm going to show you a little bit about what's new in some of our later releases as well. So if there's one thing I want you to remember about Unity in the Highland Software OnBase family is that Unity is a platform. Yes, the Unity client is our new interface, our brand new OnBase client, but it is so much more than that. It is our new development platform, not only as a client, but for disconnected users, and also for our many product integrations that utilize the application server in the backend, which means that many of our products, not just the Unity client, but everything from Outlook integration to our Office integrations, share this same interface and feature set and same architecture, meaning they're all utilizing this back Unity technology. So if you remember that Unity is a platform, we'll just jump right in. So most likely the goal of your organization, when it comes to OnBase anyway, most likely your goal is to deploy software that will help users do their jobs better, that's feature-rich, that helps them be more productive, that makes them more efficient, but at the same time doesn't make the IT department go broke, doesn't take tons of time to deploy all these resources, all this time to get the software out. So you want to deliver robust functionality to the users while not going broke managing the technical complexities associated with deploying the software. Sound about right? You want to make it easy for the users and easy for the IT department. So prior to the Unity client, what were our offerings? Well, we have the OnBase client, probably which many of you are using, our traditional desktop client, and it is very feature-rich, very robust, but unfortunately has some complexities when you're trying to deploy the OnBase client in a WAN environment, in that distributed WAN environment, in that enterprise solution where users are all over the place, sometimes across town, in some cases across the world. So then you look at the web client. And with it comes a shared architecture, centralized administration. It's a very easy to use browser-based solution. And unfortunately though, while it's really easy to deploy because it has that centralized administration, everything's happening on the server, all you need is a web browser to start using it, we are in some cases limited by what features we can make available in a browser. A web-based, browser-based application is just not as robust as that thick or fat client infrastructure. And so in steps the Unity client, and it really is the best of these two worlds. It is a smart client, which means that it has the richness and robustness of a desktop application with all the benefits of a web-based backend or web-based infrastructure and that centralized or server-based administration and execution. So if you look at the value or the ROI of the Unity client and the Unity platform and all of our Unity-based product integrations, you're going to find advantages both in the richness and robustness of the features we provide and also the ease of centralized administration. And our presentation today is going to focus on those two things. So first, let's start with interface and features. The Unity client, while it is a platform, and I did say that's the one thing I want you to remember, it is a client. It is our next generation OnBase desktop client. It is a Windows-based application installed on that workstation, and it is designed to facilitate ease of use. We use WPF, or Windows Presentation Foundation, as the backend, and it provides a really rich, robust user experience. And who cares about how beautiful the interface is and how easy it is to use and the features that it provides? Well, of course, first and foremost, the end users, the business users, because this is the tool that they're going to use to do their jobs better. But they're not the only ones that care about this rich interface and this ease of use. Administrators care too, because the easier the software is to use, the more the end users can help themselves, the less calls to support, the less training that's required for those users. And as much as a user can teach themselves how to use the software, that's one less call to support. So the Unity client, in terms of its ease of use, will help increase user adoption, improve workforce productivity, and minimize training and support costs. So how do we do this? We took a step back from the OnBase client and the web client and said, how do we promote ease of use? Well, think of yourself. What applications do you in your world already know how to use? What do most of our customers already know how to use? Well, Microsoft Office technologies. Microsoft Outlook is on many of our desktops, always open. So we took a look at that familiar tabbed ribbon found within the Microsoft Office applications. And yes, this ribbon is familiar to a lot of people that already use Office 2007 and 2010 products, so there's that instant familiarity. But it's not just the familiar look and feel and the fact that this looks really pretty because it's kind of graphical with a lot of different icons. The ribbon is all about the discoverability of features. You know, when Microsoft introduced the ribbon, they did it because 75% of the software change requests that they were receiving for Word and Outlook 2003 were for functionality that already existed in the product, which means that users couldn't find what they were looking for to get their jobs done. And if you can picture, Word 2003, and you can picture our OnBase client, it is a menu and a menu-driven system. So you have to know where to go to find what you're looking for. You got to know to go to the admin menu. You got to know to go to user administration. It requires some level of memorization to find what you're looking for. And that was true in those old Office products. And so Microsoft said, we got to redesign this. So they created tabbed ribbons that organized features in a way that makes sense. They kept features, related features together. They only show you tabs based on the document you were looking at, or maybe what you have selected in that document. If I've got a table in my Word document, then that table tab appears. They make it easier for you. They put the features that users use most often along the left-hand side. It's all about that discoverability of features so that users could take advantage of the software and maybe help themselves learn it. Well, we did the same thing with OnBase. So not only is there that familiarity down to the tab and the ribbon and the color, but we also put OnBase features. We've organized them in a way that makes sense for that user. So we started with the ribbon, and we brought it into our new Unity client interface, and we changed the way we present OnBase. So we present familiar features of OnBase, such as document retrieval, in a whole new way. So here's document retrieval with your doc type and keyword selection and your native full text search component to search all of OnBase right from retrieval and combine that with your keywords. You've got your hit list along the center. You select a document. You can actually click on that tab at the top, and all of the features available for this document now become available. We even have an information panel along the right-hand side, so instead of flying information up in front, we nestle it right alongside. We can even embed the document viewer right in the client. We could even collapse that pane along the left-hand side. Because this happens to be an image document, we have an image tab with features available to that file format. If this were an eForm, this particular contextual tab would of course change. You can get rid of that retrieval and provide more real estate. Back to my document tab. I've got my keywords, and as I click or scroll between these documents, the information in the panel and the document itself both change. I can get all of my notes right alongside the document, any cross-referenced or related documents, again, right alongside this primary document, and one of the lesser-known features of OnBase, collaboration. So the ability to discuss content in OnBase and keep that conversation right alongside the document. So no different than replying to or commenting on a photo in Facebook. I'm able to make those same comments and subscribe to these different conversations to documents in OnBase. So as users are resolving exceptions or working through document revisions, all of that collaboration and conversation formerly found with an email is right alongside the document. So I could go on and on and on about all of the features available in the OnBase Unity client, but we've kind of narrowed it down to what I believe to be the top 5 features that will kind of change the way Unity client can help your user base. So integrated workflow, document list organization, custom query filters, our send to and advanced mail, so kind of getting documents out of OnBase, and then finally home and favorites. So we'll go through these one at a time. The first is what we kind of call the integrated workflow experience. For those of you using workflow today, many of you are probably familiar with the workflow interface, and that absolutely still exists within OnBase. I can get all of my queues and my life cycles and my list of documents that I have to process, my related documents, but we've also brought workflow to the document. We're bringing the information to the user. So if I happen to retrieve or I'm on a document anywhere in the Unity client, those workflow tasks are available to me within that task tab ribbon. So if this document is in workflow and I have access to the queue and to the task, they will be made available to me and I can execute this task from the document itself anywhere in the client. I can even interact with all of those prompts to enter reasons or fill out forms or re-enter my password directly from that document. I don't have to be in workflow to take full advantage of this interface. And along the right-hand side are all my related documents formerly found within that workflow work folder. But of course, the workflow classic interface is still there, but it takes advantage of sortable columns and rearranging some of this interface. And we also have our tab ribbon right in workflow along the top. And as we continue to work through this interface in the Unity client, you'll see even more changes that allow the user to personalize the workflow experience that they establish for themselves. So that tab ribbon available right in workflow. I happen to be on an image document. There's that image tab. On my document tab, all my same document information brought right into that workflow interface. We can even see, here's just a quick sneak peek at workflow in OnBase 12. And we now allow the ability for that user in Unity to dock and undock that panes, a lot like we do in the classic OnBase client, but also the ability to completely set up a new layout for themselves. You get all the same grouping, stacking, and sorting of those columns. You'll now see the tasks up in the ribbon in workflow. But don't worry, if you're used to the classic interface, that is still available. Simply select that in your change layouts, but just a new way to look at workflow. The process flow diagrams have been improved and look very Visio-like, so you can see what queue you're on in that workflow and maybe where the document is going to go. So just a little preview there. The second is document list organization. And what do I mean by that? It doesn't matter what type of content you store in OnBase. When the user conducts a search, they're getting a list of content. And how do they filter through that list, creating for themselves the precise result set that they need to get their job done? So here's just a quick look at what that looks like, but I'm going to back out and kind of show you how we got here. So first, I conduct my search, and in my demo scenario I just did on this full doc type group of accounts payable. And the first thing that we provide is how many documents resulted from the search. And this is huge because it gives you a gauge as to how many things you're looking at, but also in some cases when I conduct a search, I already have in my mind about how many documents I could get. And if it's 10 and I have way more than that or way less, that's maybe something I want to look at. But in any case, watch that search results as we work through this list. The first opportunity I have in my search result list is to actually customize this display. So I can sort columns ascending and descending. Watch my date along the right-hand side, most recent to the oldest, and back and forth. Again, I have my document viewer, and I can view that embedded document viewer, and as I click through this list, we'll toggle the display. But back to my result set or my document list. I can also group, shift, stack, and resize columns. So let's take a look at this list and watch as the user is able to personalize or customize their display of a document list. kind of used to be formerly that to get some of this customization, you had to go for a custom query, and that was set at the custom query level. Well, now the user can establish their own display for a document type list within document retrieval and in particular custom queries. The first is here, I'm actually going to group my documents by type. So I've simply taken my type column, you can watch along the right-hand side that type column, and dragged it up to my group by area. And now it's instantly sorted for me all the documents in my list based on type. Well, imagine doing that for any column. Document type, keyword, date. We're simply grouping all of the documents that have this same value. I can now expand that particular group, and I'm instantly on a list of just my packing slips. I can also reorder the columns. So in this case, I already know I'm looking at packing slips. Let's move that over to the right and bring the date a little bit closer into the user's view. I can even stack columns on top of each other. So now name and date are stacked right on top of each other in that display. I can resize, expanding that column, taking advantage of all of my real estate. And all of this customization persists between sessions. It's stored per user in the database. So every time I log in, my document retrieval will be exactly as I've customized it. And I can have a unique customization for document retrieval, each individual custom query, and all of my other document lists. But let's say this doesn't work for a particular search and/or I just completely messed it up. No problem. I can clear that customization, and I'm right back where I started. In addition to document list organization, you'll find in any document list the ability to filter the column. When you think of a big spreadsheet of data with rows and columns and all these different data values, what application to work through that data instantly comes to mind? Well, for most of us, it's probably Microsoft Excel. Well, we borrowed from Microsoft Excel some of that column filtering capability. So in this case, I'm going to do a contains filter. So I simply selected the icon right on the left-hand side of the name column, selected all of the of the different filter values available from this long list. So I'm going to do contains. And then as I start to type in that filter, watch as my document count changes. So I go from 90, as I enter 6, I'm to 53, 6, 7, 14, and then finally 6, 7, 6, I'm down to 5 documents, and I've gotten the 5 results for purchase order 676. A really great way to filter that result set and find what I'm looking for. And again, this type of column filtering also persists between sessions. But I can always clear that filter, and I'm right back where I started. Another example is to do a filter on the type column, where here I'm presented with all of the different instances of that value. Now imagine this being a status keyword value, or use this as an opportunity to find under-indexed documents where the keyword value is actually blank. Where am I missing a keyword value, which later someone's going to probably want for search? If it's not there, they can't find it. Here's an opportunity to maybe do a little bit of data cleanup, or just filter my list based on type. Again, available for a document type as well as any particular keyword value. And I want to clear all my values, no problem. If I want to remove my filter bar completely, this just causes more confusion, I can do that as well. All right, so number 3, custom query filter features. So in addition to all of the stuff we just saw, custom queries provide additional functionality to filter a document list. And we do this with a text, an instance, and a pinch filter feature. So here is an HR example. And in custom queries, we actually provide the ability for tabbed results. So a lot like Internet Explorer, where you may have multiple tabs for the different browser windows you have open, I could have multiple tabs for the different searches or queries that I'm performing. Well, let's take a look at one of these text filters. The first one is simple. I have a name filter that corresponds with my name column. And as I type in that value along the left-hand side, watch how the values filter. So this is just a simple contains filter, H-E, H-E-N, and I'm instantly filtering that list to all of the documents for Henry Ratcliffe. The next example of a custom query filter feature is an instance filter. And we borrowed this idea from internet shopping websites such as Amazon or eBay. I mean, how many times do you type in what you're looking for, and then you filter along the left-hand side for women's, this size, this price, new or used. It's that exact same concept. And not only would it give you all the different instance values available, but we let you know before you even select it how many different documents in that list contain that value. So here's everything that's paid, that's unpaid, that's in a pending status, that needs review, that needs approval, that's for this department. It really doesn't matter. So here I can select my facilities department, my list is filtered, combine that with my position of reception, and I'm instantly down to all of the employees in this department and this role. And then the final filter feature that we have is that of a pinch filter. And what it does is it uses what we call a spark line to represent values that fall between two extremes, the lowest and the highest. So in this case, we may have a pinch filter on invoice amount, and our spark line shows the distribution of documents between those two values. And it may be kind of hard to see, but you can see there's peaks and valleys that represent where we have a lot of documents between these values. So you can see many of our invoices are probably in the $200 to $400 range, with a couple up near that $4,000 range. And it gets its name, that pinch filter, because as we pinch these two thumbs together, we actually filter the values presented across that line. So as I move it to 500, our list filters. As I move it closer to 4,000, between 3,000 and 4,000, my list filters again. Just another opportunity for dates and value, numeric or currency amounts to kind of filter some of those values along that line. All right, number 4. Send to an advanced mail. So it's always ironic to me that you spend all this time and all this money getting documents into OnBase only to need to get them out, to send them to someone, maybe who's internal to your organization that doesn't have OnBase, or an external user. And we have a lot of ways to work with documents in OnBase and kind of get them out and make them available to other people. And that could be sending this document as an attachment, as an encrypted attachment, taking it offline in a briefcase environment, sending it to an envelope, printing it, saving it to file. And I want to let you know that all of these types of options are available. And in Unity, we've even taken some of them to the next level. For example, you can take a document in OnBase that happens to be an image file that has all of these different OnBase notes on it. And you can convert this image file with its notes to an encrypted PDF and keep some of that note text with the file. So here I am. This is just a particular resume. Maybe we want someone else to take a look at this document and see if we want to hire this candidate. Or maybe they're outside of our organization completely. I send to. I get my dialog along the right-hand side to select some of my different file formats that I can convert to. I can print some pages, all pages. I can include my notes, not include my notes. We have a lot of really different cool printing and mailing options. In fact, I can do all of this and just generate a link so that someone has to click on the link or click on what we call a UPOP file that'll pop the file open in OnBase, taking advantage of both external mail, so they receive the notification in Outlook, but the document remains in OnBase with its security the entire time. So we have many different ways. Maybe I want to send the file completely out. That's what I'm going to do here, and I'm going to encrypt that file. In other cases, I want to send them an email, but I don't ever want the document to leave OnBase. These are both possibilities. In this case, I'm going to encrypt this document. I'm going to create right here a password for this encrypted file. Enter that password. Now, I, of course, have to communicate that password to the recipient, but we'll leave that to the person sending the email to do that. Maybe I just want to send a particular page of this document, not all 70 pages of my TIFF, but maybe just the first 2. And I want to include my notes. And now, here's that email, here's that encrypted PDF. We're not going to send it out, but you get the idea. It generated this document, interfaced with Outlook, brought it up, used the auto name string, and got me ready to send this email out. And now we'll say we're on the receiving side, but in this case, I open the document, enter the password that was provided as part of that encryption. There's my document, now in PDF, and there's my note along the top. I mean, very cool capabilities out of the box to help the users kind of get through some of those things they were doing in a manual workaround automatically with Unity. And then finally, number 5 in our top 5 here is home and favorites. Yes, sir?
Do you have a question on the encryption?
Sure.
Is it just 40-bit, or can you do higher encryption than 40-bit?
Ooh, that is a good question. I will find out for you. Yeah, I will find out.
With certain places, it's got to be 128-bit for lean.
I want to say that we support 128-bit, but I can check in just a second, and I will let you know. Good question. Any other questions on what we've seen so far? Okay, cool. All right, number 5. Unity makes things easier to find because it has this whole tabbed ribbon and it kind of helps the user along. But we have other features such as home and favorites that make it even easier. So for users that have a lot of different forms to fill out, but they really only use those top 3 all the time, mark them as a favorite. If they have a custom query that's the first place they go every time they log in, or if they're always going right to workflow, set that as the home page. And actually in 12.0, we're going to be unveiling a new concept in Unity, which is called the personal page, which allows a user to create their very own task-oriented home page. So they'll log in, and for the first time, this page will be blank. But they can then send things to this home page, building for themselves their own dashboard of all of the information they need. And that could be anything from an individual document to a workflow queue, to an e-form that they fill out, to their required reading documents, to the ability to search all of their tiles on the home page, or conduct a full text search of all OnBase content directly from this home. And then they can design their own personal page or their own dashboard, bringing all these features together. The irony of this personal page is the reason that we created it is because the Unity client is so packed with features and there's so many different interfaces and layouts and things going on that users were kind of like jumping around the client itself. So we've eliminated the application jumping and we're keeping people in one application OnBase, but then we further wanted to bring the information to the user by creating this personal page, and you'll see that with the release of 12. All right. But not only do we have these client features, there's really so much more. And there's 2 kind of complementary components that I wanted to highlight. The first is Unity Forms, and if we have time, I'm going to demo the creation of one live. And the second is the Unity Briefcase. So the first, Unity Forms are designed in the Unity client, but accessible from the Unity client, the web client, or any web page, including an iPad. So what Unity Forms allow you to do is they enable anyone to create professional-looking forms that create a positive end-user experience. So now me, marketing major from a party school that doesn't know the first thing about programming, is able to create an electronic form that help the users submit data appropriately, that helps them do their jobs. And when I say that provide a positive user experience, I mean users expect that when I need to enter a date, I'm going to get a calendar picker. Or you're going to tell me if I've entered something incorrectly, if I've missed a field. Or the form knows how a social security number should be formatted. Or it knows how to do calculations. Well, all of that is possible with Unity Forms. And I don't have to know a bit of programming to build a form that has some of these advanced features. And here's just an example of all of the different capabilities available without any programming. So maybe I want to set up a tabbed form that has different layers of security based on that tab. And as we continue to evolve that product, you'll even see that at the section level or the field level, the ability to set up that type of security, which formerly on an e-form would require some scripting capabilities to meet some of these features. Now you don't need any coding. What's coming for us, the ability to customize these forms to the colors and the logos of your organization or your agency, the ability to do calculations, whether it's an individual line item or a grand total, and then finally even something as simple as cascading data sets. So I'm going to select the state, that will filter the counties, that will filter to the cities. All possible through Unity Forms. And coming in 12, you'll see custom actions, which are really just field triggers. So if I select one option, it will dynamically change the form with the additional fields available based on that selection. We'll see more concepts of read-only security, the ability to auto-number these forms automatically, and an even easier to use designer where you can drag and drop from the toolbox or just double-click a control to add it to the form. All right, so creating electronic forms without coding. Yeah, right, you want to see it to believe it? Well, I'm going to demo in a second if we do have time. But if nothing else, just to give you a quick peek at the designer. So you have all your controls along the left-hand side. Want to add a keyword, want to add a property. Quickly double-click to add it to the form. And then over here, you set up those forms. So if I set a name keyword, I simply give that label a name. And I want to trigger an autofill, I just simply select the autofill that I want triggered as opposed to entering that name as I enter that name. So really easy capabilities to set up forms and design those forms. You can test drive the forms and see if they work right from this interface before you even publish them. So some really cool features of these forms, of course, the point-and-click designer, the ability to share these forms via web pages, platform and browser compatibility, internationalization, the ability to test drive. And I think the biggest thing is that because these are OnBase Unity forms, you can upgrade without issue, because instead of having to worry about all this other scripting, we know they'll work from 11 to 12. Yes, ma'am. Question?
If a form is created, can it be locked so it can't be changed?
The form itself? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that would be at the designer level. Okay. But you can also make forms revisable so that you could have, form revision 1, form revision 2, mm-hmm. and then we'll know when we render the form that was submitted, what form template it was created from, whether it was 1 or it was 2, and it will render it appropriately. Okay. But you could also lock it so that it can't further be edited.
So I can do one form for all my court reporters to use?
Correct, yes. The next piece of functionality kind of complementary to the Unity client is the Unity briefcase. And very simply, the Unity briefcase allows OnBase users to use OnBase while they're disconnected. So I have no connectivity whatsoever. I have no connection to the OnBase application server, to the database and disk scripts, yet I'm able to take advantage of OnBase documents, forms, and features. So here I'm looking at an OnBase document, and I have my notes panel with my OnBase notes and the ability to add another note without any connectivity whatsoever. So whether you're talking about a field worker, to someone in social services that's making a house call, to an attorney that wants to take all of that case file to court with them, they can take OnBase with them on the road. They can create and edit new forms, they can import and index new documents, add and delete notes, and make revisions to documents all while they're offline. And just a quick look at this, they log in as normal, they can fill out a form. That form could even have a signature on it. That's an E-form, and the same will be true for Unity forms and 12. But any OnBase document can be taken offline and worked with disconnected. This is a really unique competitive advantage for us. No one else in the ECM space that we know of has this level of offline experience. And you ask me, I think every organization has some level of a worker that just wants to do some work while they're disconnected. It could be someone that is always on the road. They're always making these kind of home visits or site visits. Or it could just be someone that travels a lot, that experiences downtime of inconnectivity. Maybe they're on an airplane, but they want to keep working. We have managers at High-Owned Software that are in sales, and they're on the road selling OnBase, working with partners and customers, but at the same time, they manage a team of people and have to fill out performance reviews. So they take those reviews with them, and they can fill out some of those reviews while they're in flight on a plane. This is very process-driven, so documents enter workflow upon synchronization, meaning that as soon as I establish connectivity, any documents that I've captured while disconnected enter OnBase. And then finally, we can actually allocate work to users as well. So I know I'm going to be visiting 3 sites over the course of the next week. It can push all of the documents that I need to take with me to my briefcase. This is also click once deployable, and in 12 we'll see support for Unity forms and signatures. And I encourage you to visit our product community for all of the information on the Unity client. All right, so as we kind of wrap up here, I just want to say a couple notes about the other side. What about all of those administrators who are now responsible for deploying this software? It's like the users want it, this makes sense, it's got a lot of bells and whistles, a lot of great features, but now it's the job of that IT department to make this software available to the end users. And this is really a desktop client, so all of the richness and robustness that we just talked about that is optimized for a WAN environment. So the database and disk groups may be in one location, and we may have a user across town that needs access to the software. So who cares about this? Of course the IT department, but users care too, because they want software that is easy to upgrade, that works well, that performs well. They want software that is easy to use. So what Unity also does is it provides that concept of centralized administration. It also, by its very nature, because it is server-based, security is increased, vulnerability is reduced, and for the users, we've improved those remote connection speeds. How? Because so much more of the work is done on the server, which is close to the database and disk groups that is in that LAN environment, while the user from their client machine is really just making that request. So when you talk about installing the software and setting up connections to the database and user permissions to the file shares, would you rather do that on one workstation, an application server, or 1,000 different client machines? And of course the answer is I'd rather only do this once on the app server. And that's exactly what Unity provides. All of the connection to the OnBase database, all of the NTFS permissions to the disk groups, and here's where we improve that performance, all of the execution of the business process logic is happening on that application server. Then all of our client machines simply connect in that secure HTTPS connection to the app server, which makes that connection to the database and disk group. And by its very nature, this concept of centralized administration means that it's just more secure. So if you look at it another way, our database and disk group connect to our app server, which connect to our client. But we can also introduce firewalls between the database and disk group or the app server, maybe even another proxy server or web server for another layer of security. And we can set up a firewall between the client and the app server and only let secure traffic pass. Making this type of deployment extremely secure. This also means that when you're talking about a cloud or an OBOL customer, they can now use a desktop client in a SaaS offering or a cloud solution. We could host the database, the disk groups, the application server, and our infrastructure while the Unity client is simply installed on those workstations. Yes, sir?
How are you addressing the issue of individuals using computers that are not PCs?
Well,
you still have the web, which is not as feature-rich as...
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, in those cases, they would have to use the web client. So if they've got a machine that's not Windows-based, unfortunately, Unity won't work for them. If they're in a situation, regardless of the reason, where they have to have a zero footprint install, then I think the only option there is that HTML web client. And we'll see many customers where maybe the majority of their users will use Unity, but they'll have a couple people that are still using the web client for those reasons. They've got a couple Mac users. They've got a couple people on site in another location that are using a third-party machine for whatever reason that they can't have a local install, and they'll use the web client in those cases. And maybe it won't have all of the features of Unity, but it'll provide them a nice OnBase experience, that meets their requirements.
I have one more question.
Sure.
When you utilize the Unity client,
yeah.
Do you have to have a Unity API behind the scenes that's doing work?
You do not. Nope,
Okay.
you do not. Not at all. You purchase the Unity client server, and with that is the application server and all of the interface components for the client machines.
Understood.
So yeah, you do not need the API. That would be if you wanted to do some additional custom work, All right, so finally, as we wrap up this, how do we install this on hundreds of workstations? So now, kind of as we've just described, the Unity client is a desktop install that does have an interface component on the workstation. That's what makes it so robust. This also means that it can interact with locally installed applications. That's where we get our integrations with Outlook and Office, and where we'll see some client-side scripting capabilities with OnBase 12. Well, the Unity client has a deployment method called click once. And what this means is that the administrator can configure once on a deployment server, creating a link or generating a link that is simply distributed to users so that they can install on their workstation. So we do this once, we create this link, we email it out, we put it on a website, user clicks on the link, they install the Unity client. Easy if I've got one person that's not in my building. I don't have to go to their workstation, we don't have to worry about an MSI, I don't have to worry about whether they're an administrator on their own machine. Because you do not need to be an administrator for Click Once technology. I can click on this link and I can make the install. Well, now imagine hundreds or thousands of people being able to rapidly distribute this type of software. And most people will say that not having to be an administrator on your machine to do this install is the best benefit of Click Once. I will actually say that the best benefit is the automated updates, which means that when I update the install on the deployment server, the client machine knows whether the server deployment has been updated, and it will immediately update that client machine with the latest software. So talk about making an upgrade from 11 to 12 so much easier. The client knows that it's been updated to 12, and it downloads that change locally to that machine, and it keeps those two things in sync. So instead of uninstalling and reinstalling and ensuring that the user is an administrator on their machine or someone else has to do the install, they can do it themselves. And at High On Software, we actually just have a page in our intranet with links to all of the different OnBase Click Once installs that can be made possible. We are Windows 7 certified and fully supported in virtual environments, which kind of brings us to the end of our session today, but as we talk about this final piece, so now we've got the software on there, we've got it secure, how do we improve that user experience? This is the simple concept of the client is simply making the request, but all of the work is being done on the app server. And as we kind of end, I want to leave you with this thought. When a user logs into OnBase, depending on what they're licensed for and what their permissions are, we make between 60 and 150 queries to the database back and forth to get the right settings for them, right? I mean, more or less. That's how many calls we make. Well, in an OnBase client environment where the client machine is talking directly to the database, that's 60 to 150 times we have to go back and forth before we finally have all the information we need. Well, now what if the client said to the application server, here's my username and password. All right, now you figure it out and then just give me back the results. So now the application server that's doing all of the work is making all of those requests back and forth. All of that back and forth is happening on the faster LAN environment. We get the response, we send it back to the client, ultimately improving performance. Yes, sir?
I do have one other question.
Yeah.
In a virtual, I assume that you can have multiple application servers hitting one database to
Absolutely.
scale out?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions for me? I think, where am I at with time? Am I over?
Right on time.
All right, okay. Let me just click through a couple things. This will kind of illustrate that. So here's the client machine. We got a direct ODBC, direct access to the disk group, and the workstation has to do all of the work. I mean, that's kind of what's happening with the OnBase client environment. So how do we fix that? Unity. So now let's take another look. We're talking about our friend, the application server, and now it's making the connection to the database. It's doing those 60 to 150 back and forth. It is the only account that has access to the file share. So instead of having to set up NTFS permissions for all of your users, we do that once on the app server. And all of this is happening on the faster internal network in your data center. All of the client machines, we don't care where they are. They're simply connecting via HTTP or HTTPS to the app server, which makes that request. And the best part, the server does all of the work, all of the heavy lifting. So all of this back and forth, all of this kind of chattiness, they call it, happens on the faster network, and we simply send back the results. And as I wrap up today, I want you to keep in mind that all of this stuff that I've talked about, from custom query filter features to sending an encrypted PDF to using the application server, to the availability of these solutions in the cloud or in an OBOL environment, the Unity client itself is just one example. We have a whole product family of applications that share this same infrastructure. And these are our Unity-based integrations and our next generation OnBase products that leverage this platform, that have that same interface, that same centralized administration, and leave the user in their preferred application. Some people, they want to be in the Unity client all day. They live in OnBase. Other people, however, like me, live in Microsoft Outlook. So now document retrieval can be made available exactly as it's presented in Unity from Microsoft Outlook. I click on my document retrieval. I get that same look and feel with that grouping, stacking, sorting, and embedded viewer. How did this get here? Click once. Where is the work happening? The application server. And I'm leaving the user in Microsoft Outlook. The same is true for our Office business applications. I want to look for a Word document, edit it, save it back into OnBase. I don't ever need to leave Word to make this happen. How do I find the document? Custom queries. There's my filter features. Same thing. Click once, application server. I can be in Office, you can be in Outlook, someone else can be in Unity. We're all looking at the same thing. So when that call comes into support, oh, you're looking at custom queries? I know exactly what you're looking at. I know exactly how the software got there. You manage those different click once deployments, multiple application servers, potentially how you want to load balance. We're good to go. Finally, application enabler. We've talked about that a little bit. Leaving in the line of business system. Whether you own it, whether somebody else owns it, we can enable that screen and pull back content in that same Unity look and feel. And now in 12, Application Enabler and Unity are almost one and the same. Application Enabler looks and feels exactly like Unity. So in conclusion, have we met our goal of really rich features and easy to deploy? I hope so. And that's really what the Unity client is designed to be, that rich user experience that provides a positive user experience, helps the user, but also makes life a heck of a whole lot easier for the admins. And for more information on the Unity client, if you're not there already, I encourage you to join the Unity client product community. for updates on features, frequently asked questions, videos, screenshots. There's a lot of new stuff coming in 12 that I would love to make you aware of. So with that, if you have more information, I put my picture up here. Obviously, I'm standing here in front of you, but that is what I look like on Highland Community. That is my avatar. This is like my work Facebook. I am out there all the time, just what is new, what's going on, who's posting questions about what, and I have had some really amazing things happen out on Community. You know, a customer will post a question, and a lot of times it's good news. Yeah, we can do that. Here's how. They just had no idea. But in some cases, I have to say, no, we can't quite do that, but maybe you could accomplish that with the script. And I swear to God, as soon as I said that, another customer responded, we're doing it with the script, and pasted the whole script that they were using to get it out there. So some really cool collaboration and sharing of information, whether the expert is someone from Highland, the partner, or another customer that's trying to accomplish the same thing is happening out on Community. So I encourage you to visit Community. Any other questions for me?
If interfacing with Outlook,
Yes.
anything special that Outlook has to do, accommodate?
No, not necessarily. This type of integration is supported on Outlook 2007 or 2010, but there's nothing special from the Outlook perspective. The only requirement from our side is that it is the full Office Outlook client. So it is that desktop-based version of the Outlook client, and we can install our add-in component using click once, and you log right in. You're good to go. And same thing, OnBase credentials, NT authentication, it doesn't matter.
What's the licensing cost model?
For the Unity client, it is a Unity client server-based license, and that is at $10,000. And then, of course, it's a normal OnBase concurrent client. And Outlook integration is sold or licensed per version of Outlook, and it's $5,000 for each server-based license. So $5,000 for 2007, $5,000 for 2010, and again, it's the normal concurrent client consumption. And those are the list prices from Highland. Any other questions for me on any of the products, licensing, features? Yeah?
I was going to ask about the add-in.
Yeah, sure.
You did state the add-in for Outlook is going to cost X amount of dollars.
Right.
I assume that each individual add-in, will you also have to get an add-in? Is an add-in Office specific? You get the add-in in different parts of like Excel and things?
Unfortunately, they are different. So the Outlook integration is a server-based license per version of Outlook. So you can have an unlimited number of Outlook users for that $5,000, essentially. The Office integrations are specific to version of Office, and they include Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, but they actually are either a workstation or concurrent client license. And the reason that we have this different license model is that we assume everyone in the organization is working in Microsoft Outlook, and this can truly be their OnBase client. They can live in Outlook and get retrieval and workflow and import all from Microsoft Outlook. Our Office business applications, while they provide that similar experience of retrieval and import and workflow, we're not living in Microsoft Word. But for those users that do have a need to open a Word document, save it in OnBase, edit it, manage those revisions, collaborate on it, for them, we can do a workstation license, which is much more cost-effective if you've got a small number of people working in that environment, or they can share a pool of concurrents in that case. So we do license them separately, thinking everyone's going to use Outlook, but to make it a little more cost-effective as opposed to a separate license for Outlook, we make those workstations so you can get a smaller number at a more affordable price.
And I want to clarify, so the stuff that we're showing with the Word integration, if you're in the client itself, you're able to edit those documents without having to worry about that. This is only if you want to be in Outlook and make that query and retrieve from like Word itself and not be in like a Unity client. If you're in a Unity client, there's no worry about that.
Yeah, you can edit right from Unity, exactly. Thank you. All right, thank you all so much. I really appreciate your time and attention.